Everyone looks way more fresh-faced in those photos.
That was a very good day for both of you, I must admit.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a bit cruel, isn't it?
I think we all look pretty good, man, considering, a little bit battle worn here and there.
Yeah, I'm definitely a good stone heavier now than I was in that picture. That's for sure.
You still look stunning, so no matter what happens.
Oh, thanks, baby. I think that I look at it in terms of, in some cultures, being overweight is considered a form of wealth, and I would have the best huts and
The best huts.
the best huts, and they would bring all of the young men to me.
Do they bring you packs of berries? And
yes, they would bring me twigs and berries. And,
and they lay their assegai at your feet. They worship you with twigs, berries, and a goat named Gerald.
Yes, all of that would happen, and I for one am happy for all of that to happen. So on that bombshell, hello, good evening, and welcome to everybody for the May virtual Power Platform virtual happy hour. We're humbled and honoured to have with us this evening Sir Nicholas of Doelman, all the way from Canada land. And Nicholas, I can't pronounce your surname. Nicholas, can you do Hayduk? Is Hayduk?
Hayduk.
Hayduk. Thank you.
Sounds way cooler than what Alison was saying. Just throwing it
does, yes. at least I was polite enough to ask. So
yeah.
Just going to throw that out there. And both of these wonderful people are expert in Power Apps portals, of which I think there are very few people on the planet can say they're expert in. And so we're looking forward to talking all things portals and hearing about the highs, the lows, and the frustrations from these two guys. So just before we start, do we have the code of conduct? Thank you very much, Carlos. So code of conduct, just to quickly run through, I'm sure many of you have been here many times before, but it's just to be aware of others and to be patient and friendly and welcoming and respectful, and to be open to all viewpoints and understand that not everybody agreed with you, and that's fine too. It's fine for other people to be wrong on the internet, either speaking or typing, and you can quite happily let that go if it bothers you. Just be kind and considerate to others, and that way we are all much more likely to learn more, because we'll hear from everybody. And if you do disagree with everybody, you're more than welcome to tell us that you disagree and give us your viewpoint so we can learn from you. So moving on, I guess probably the next thing is just to go straight into the good evening, Nicholas Hayduk, sorry, and Nick Doelman. Nicholas, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, a little bit of background? What's your name and where'd you come from?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the other Nick from Canada. I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is kind of in the western side, in the middle of the prairies, so you can see for miles. I actually started off my career with a company called ADX Studio that some of you may have heard of before, and so ADX Studio was the company that built what is now known as Power Apps portals. So that was 12 years ago now. So last 12 years I've been living and breathing Power Apps portals, and way back in the day I even got to meet this other Nick from Canada who knows a bit about portals as well.
What are the odds of the two of you both being called Nick and both being into portals and both living in Canada? Probably not. They're probably quite high, but
I don't know, dude. Based on the number of people that actually know and understand portals, I'd say this is very much a miracle.
Like I was going to say, like I know one person, which is Nick Doelman. So I've only recently met Nicholas. So yeah, so it's just odd that there are two people and you're both in Canada and you're both called Nick.
Because ADX Studio is kind of based here in Canada, there's kind of a higher concentration of people who do portals in Canada. But the fact that we're both named Nick, I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
Yeah.
I can write it.
How much were we going to sell the movie rights for again, Nick? I forget. We're in
Millions.
negotiations.
Millions.
Yeah.
Well, what actually happens in the movie? Like, can we ever say in like the storyline and what happens in the movie, or is it just going to be purely factual? Because I think if we put an element of fantasy in there, we could involve some powerlifting.
Oh, I think the people want a true factual documentary on our life. I mean, that's what the people want.
Yeah, we can't make this shit up. Like, seriously. Yeah. Like, it's some of the wild and wacky things that have gone on. It's funny because I started working with Dynamics CRM version 1, like back in 2002, 2003. Before that, I was doing stuff with Great Plains. So I've been in this a long time, and was interesting. I had a small consulting firm from about 2006 to 2013. And I think it was around 2008, 2009. I get a call from an organization here in town. I'm in Ottawa, Canada. So for those of you who kind of look at a big map of Canada, I'm kind of in the more towards the east, but it's kind of more central. So pretty much due south is like New York and Philadelphia and all those types of places. And it was interesting. So this is actually the story of how I met Nick. And Nick claims he doesn't remember this story, but we'll see. So I got
it's not that I don't remember. I blocked it from my memory. That's different.
Probably. So I get a call from an organization here in town. They said, "Hey, we hear from Microsoft. You're the absolute expert on Microsoft CRM." And I'm kind of like, well, I'm the only one who actually works with it. So it's crazy enough to work with it. This was version 3 days. So actually version 3 wasn't too bad. Like version 1 was, I like to tell people CRM version 1 was good. It just was missing about 90% of what people needed to make it work. So anyways, it was kind of doing stuff with version 3, and then we got this call from this organization. So it was a small membership type based organization, and they come over and they said, well, we need some help. We need some local support. Our provider is out of town and it's kind of remote. And at that time, you got to realize the whole idea of remote working, and there was like on-premise servers and stuff, was a lot more difficult to log into someone's systems with like, VPNs and, virtual machines and the whole bit. So anyways, I kind of dropped over, came and took a look at their system, and it looked like it was somebody's very first CRM project that they've ever done. Now, I think we're all among friends here. If you think back at the very first either Power Platform or CRM project that you may have done, if you got to go in a time machine and were able to redo it, probably all of us would jump at that chance and fix all of the stuff that we didn't know at the time. Like I think back at my very first one, and it's just disaster. And I'm sure we all go back to those projects. We see the new underscore in our entity names, and everything was one big, huge, unmanaged thing. We had JavaScript everywhere, which we should have done plugins and anyways. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, and it wasn't bad. It was just, a lot of, neat workflows, but it was probably an entity model that was just kind of a little bit bloated and a few kind of weird things. Anyways, I'm like, okay, yeah, this, I could probably help you out. I said, but if you mind me asking, because I don't want to step on any toes. I said, who's helping you out? And they said, oh, this company called ADX Studio, like their consulting arm. Like, oh, so I'm thinking ADX at that time were well known. Shan MacArthur, of course, MVP. Is just sort of like, okay, I do not want to get on the wrong side of these guys. So I called them up, talked to one of the owners there, Doug, I think, and I said, okay, one of your clients called me. They need a bit of help. And he said, yeah, no problem. Let's do what's best for the customer kind of thing. So he said, I'll put you in touch with the guy who who kind of did a lot of the configuration work. Okay, so I get on the phone with a young Nicholas Hayduk, fresh out of school, ready to take on the world, and we walked through the solution. And it was kind of funny because Nick's telling me about how he's been working with CRM for a year and this and that, trying to kind of pound his chest a little bit. I said, yeah, that's great. I've been working with this for 5 years now. So anyways, it was all good. And I think at the end of the day, I think the client actually moved off to some other system or whatever, despite our best efforts to get them up and running again. But that's the true story of how I met Nick. So,
and what's Nick's version then of?
I honestly have no recollection of that whatsoever.
He just suddenly appeared in our lives. And
well, I know when my first recollection of meeting Nick Doelman is, but it's not that. It was when we met in person. The first time I went to a conference, and I went to one of the first sessions was, I think, Colin Vermander's session, and there was this noisy, yappy guy sitting in the front row asking all these stupid questions. And then at the end of it, I think I went up to like introduce myself because I didn't really know anyone at that point. I was just, I was Nick from nowhere, and so that's when we first met. I think that was Nashville, at Summit in Nashville, and you introduced yourself, and that's when you said, "Oh, we've had a prior interaction," but I have no recollection of that supposed phone call that didn't happen.
Yeah, and that's true. And then I think it was after Nashville, it was Extreme, was a couple months later, right? Where you went it was the Innovation Challenge.
Yes, I think that was the next year. I think there was a year gap there.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. You probably the years begin to meld. But I remember that there was the Innovation Challenge at Extreme 365, and you were. I think you were part of a team. I was sort of kind of help mentor, and then so you guys were genius. You won that challenge, and you built an XRM Toolbox add-in that actually got banned eventually from Microsoft. And I think it's the only XRM Toolbox tool that got pulled from the XRM Toolbox because Microsoft did not want it out there in the wild. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah,
well, I mean, I think your ability to exaggerate, you're putting it's on full display today. The whole tool didn't get banned. There was one setting that we had to turn off in the thing because Microsoft put out documentation for a setting that they realized was an internal only setting. So after the fact, when they decided to make that setting internal only, they politely asked us to remove that usage of that internal only setting from our app. But that XRM Toolbox tool, I think, is still, I haven't used it in years because it's really it was kind of before the new Power Platform Admin Center existed. Yeah. So it had some functionality to do with backups and other things that you couldn't. There was no API or there's no UI. You could only do it through APIs. So it did that. And so the setting was the ability to. The funny story is that the whole point of the project was this setting that eventually got turned off. And so the point was that you could actually back up your database back then with CRM or CDS or whatever it was. You could actually back up your database to your own storage, and you weren't then limited to the 2 years or whatever that they would give you. So you could basically in perpetuity back up your database to Azure storage. And that was, again, it worked for most people, but there were a few clients where it didn't work. And so I think Microsoft, rather than trying to figure out why it wouldn't work, just decided to make it internal only. And then we had to turn off that checkbox.
Yeah. And it was handy, right? Because at that time most licensing people only had the two environments. They had their production and sandbox. So they couldn't get the multiple environments like we can today. So if you had to do a demo or something, you had to get a dev environment, like you'd have to pay extra, but then it would only be turned on for the time you have to do your development, or if you had a bunch of different demos set up. So that tool, like, it was a setting, and you're right, because they retroactively made it internal only. And it was funny because I remember when we were pitching, where that was the idea you're going to be pitching when we're building this. And I think this is the very first XRM Toolbox tool you ever wrote too, right, Nick? It is, yeah. Honestly, when I went to that conference, that was my first, I didn't even know what XRM Toolbox was. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So that's something, because you guys, you and your team actually got it running. Out of the 3 or 4 other teams that were there, yours was the only one that was actually functional by the end of the challenge.
But you're not telling the story of why we actually won, because it had nothing to do with this little plugin that we wrote. it was all about the presentation.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, you have to build this, you have to build something, but what you have to then do is present it to the entire conference at, I don't know, some sort of party or whatever. So rather than just coming up with like a boring like tech demonstration, what we decided to do, because I happen to know, I think Colin Vermander was a judge, I think Rick McCutcheon was a judge, and Derek Borman was a judge. So those were the 3 judges, and I knew a couple of them. And so what we did is we basically just sucked up to the judges the entire time. So the whole presentation included jokes and references to how awesome the judges were. And so that's really why we won. That being said, we also won the audience's choice as well. So maybe the fact that it worked and it wasn't vaporware. Like like one of my good friends, Corey Christoffel, who still works at Microsoft, and he was the mentor for one of the other teams, and their thing was much cooler. They spent way more time actually building it out, but they just gave kind of like a regular presentation, and there was maybe a little bit of vaporware in there. So I made sure to highlight that our solution wasn't vaporware where the other people's were. So I think that helped.
Yeah. The other thing that I remember about that session too is that when we finally came with the idea, because what was built in the XRM toolbox, really you could do with like one single line of like PowerShell if you knew it. Yeah, and George Dubinsky was all like, "Why? This is stupid. It's one line of code." And it's like, well, you guys won. So sometimes all it takes is one line of code.
It got me a free pass to the next extreme, which is like, as a independent person, like that's a pretty good prize. Huge.
Yeah, it's like what, $1,000 give or take at that time anyway.
Yeah,
US. So that's like 3,000 donuts, I think, is how we would calculate that in Canadian currency.
So anyway, that's so this is the stuff movies are made of. I guess we're here to talk about portals, though. I see that the newest MVP is here. Welcome, Matt Beard, MVP. Matt, congrats. Yeah. Well deserved.
Got to be honest, it's about time.
Well, to be honest, I thought he was an MVP already for a year, kind of thing, right? It's like,
I think that's how you know.
So, in terms of portals, sorry, I don't want to cut off Matt. We can have a separate session where we talk about Matt Beard, if you like. We can make that the next happy hour. But talking about portals, cut me off. Sorry, Matt. Talking about portals, what would you say? What do you think is the best thing about portals? You know, what has been, or maybe what's been the best use case you've seen in anybody do with portals, Power Apps portals?
It's funny. There's a lot. What I like about it is, you very quickly can get a website up and running that talks directly to Dataverse. And like, I think probably a lot of you have seen my portals demo before. I've done quite a few sessions where literally in like 10 minutes, I can get a list of data from Dataverse on a web page. To me, like, I worked on projects before. I worked with portals that, building an ASPX a website and trying to like connect with the SDK or the APIs and trying to get the authentication sorted out. Of course, trying to build a security model. Like literally, I think back at one project took me about a month before I even got stuff to show up on the screen. And years later, I'm thinking about that project, thinking about portals. Like I could have done that in a week using Power Apps portals or at the time ADX Studio portals, more so than I could have custom development. So I think that's like, to me, the true power of it is how quickly you can get something up and running. In terms of the use cases, I think there's a few, but one client I've been working with actually for the last 12 years or so, and they've kind of evolved from CRM. They went online, and now they're using portals. Is really for an organization that does some training in a very, very specific industry that's really not very technical to begin with. And they were doing, so what happens is, it was an industry where there's people that are working, it's actually in the mining industry. People are working in mines. There's a whole certification process, and how they were managing it before, it was strictly using pen and paper. So they would write down, yes, you're good at safety, and yes, you're good at running the diamond drill, and yes, you're good running the front loader hopper and all this. And there's a lot of, settings and competencies that they need to measure, but it was all being done on paper. When it was done on paper, they would fax this to this organization that manages all this. They would rekey in a lot of the highlights, more of the scores than even the details. And it was just very tedious. So we began with CRM to manage that. And now we've got the portals where their workplace assessors can actually log in and rank all their candidates and generate all the documentation and things like that. And it's been working really well for them. Of course, a lot of them do it on tablets and phones and things like this. And that's expanded into a whole bunch of other programs that are very similar as well. And it's kind of like I said, it's one of these, like, if you have a good CRM project, it never ends. It's just continually adding more functionality and making things more efficient. I was working on it earlier today, kind of the next phase for another program that they're doing as well. So that's some of the cool stuff I've done. I'll turn it over to Nick. Nick probably has way more examples than I do because he's got a whole little army building portals on his end.
Well, I can give you lots of examples of when not to use portals, because that's what we see. We see a lot of those. We get a lot of calls of, so we tried to do this and it's not working. How do we make this work in portals? I want to use one of the connectors from Power Automate in my portal, and I can't. Where's that button? Yeah, that's not a button that exists. So, I always just tell people, really to overuse the word power, because we're in the Microsoft world, so we've got to overuse the word power. To overuse the word power, the real power of Power Apps portals is if your data is in Dataverse. We see kind of too many people think that, we've got Canvas apps, we've got model-driven apps, and we've got Power Apps portals. Like, those are all the same things, and it's like, no, very, very different. So obviously the help desk scenario is super, super popular. So people submitting support tickets right into Dynamics customer service. That's almost a default. I mean, everyone wants that as part of their default implementation. But really just it's a lot of we want help desk, and then we've got 2 or 3 other custom tables that we want to expose with entity lists and entity forms. And we try and tell people that if you're looking for the beautiful if you're bringing in a designer to design your portal and then you want to build that with Power Apps portals, again, probably not the platform for you. So it's more, it's very much transactional, where it's like, you got to fill out a form. You've got a nice captive audience where it's like, hey, they want to fill out this form, get that data into Dataverse. You can get those things built really quickly. As soon as you've got your user interface designer in there saying, it has to do this, this, and this. It can be done, especially with the new web API. You can certainly do that. But now you're essentially just doing custom web development. And you're not really, not that I want to get into licensing, but now you're licensing a platform without really using any of its value. So, replicating the model-driven apps that you've already got, and exposing those to external audiences, that's the way to go.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing from Microsoft too, what's kind of helped with portals is a lot of the COVID stuff, in terms of, booking vaccine appointments, booking testing and things like that. I've not worked directly, but I've sort of kind of a few organizations I know of kind of looking at that. If you look at the new Microsoft Back to Work accelerators, they're using actual portals for a lot of that as well. So there's definitely use cases. I've got a good question here about how big of a scale. That's a great question. I've worked on kind of more earlier in the ADX side, earlier on, like portals that were getting hit by thousands of users on any given day, to just a few a month. But Nick, you probably have some stories about scaling as well.
The nice thing, back in the ADX Studio days, you'd have to, that was kind of our problem, and then thankfully that became not our problem as much when Microsoft kind of took it over. So you kind of get the question a lot. I even got the question yesterday about Dynamics. I got the question: how many users can log into Dynamics at one time? Well, it's not infinite, but it's like I don't know, like as many as you want until you break it, I guess, and then you call Microsoft and say, why can't more of my users get in there? Like, there's really no practical, like, it's just, so, and it's the same with portals. It's like, well, how many users can hit it? Well, I've heard stories of like Microsoft using it internally in cases where, you know, they have tens of thousands of people hitting it at the same time every single morning. So that stuff scales. You just got to make sure you're buying the right number of licenses to make sure that you're in the right scale groups.
Yeah, and it looks like in the chat window too, Chris from Edmonton is on, and he's, or maybe from Calgary. I hope, I don't know, Chris from Alberta. He was talking about the MBAS customer story about City of Kobe. I did look at that City of Kobe is where, looking at 200K daily, 200,000 hits on a daily basis. On a probably a 311 portal kind of thing. I know that was, some of the cities have been using that too for some of their 311 stuff. Like ADX back in the day had a 311 actual had an actual 311 portal as part of the packages. I don't know if they have that now or if it's kind of been repurposed. But yeah, so
I don't want to ask the 4-letter word question of licensing. I know it's more than 4 letters before anybody.
I thought we
tells
weren't
me,
going to talk about
Okay,
that.
let's not talk about that then.
I'm
No.
happy to talk about licensing.
Well, yeah, I think when we talk about licensing,
It sucks. Oh, sorry.
yeah, it sucks, but and it is what it is. So there's nothing we can do about it. Believe us, both Nick and I have given the feedback back to Microsoft on multiple occasions. You either need to fix this, you need to adjust this, you need to do something about it. All of that being said is, and this is something that I've heard directly from Microsoft, and this is, and I don't apologize for saying this, always ask your Microsoft rep for a discount. There are discounts available. They can make things happen. Nobody, it's like buying a new car. Nobody should be paying the sticker price on a new car. There's always some room for negotiation. Definitely do that if you're going to look at implementing portals.
And before I lose my MVP award, let me preface. Let me clarify by what I mean about it sucks. The fact is it's not maybe as expensive as people think it might be. The reason it sucks is that how do you predict how many people are going to be logging into your portal next month? You can't. That's why it sucks, because you can't. So people always assume worst case. Well, I'm going to build the world's greatest portal, so every one of my customers is going to want to log in every day. So, and I have 1 million customers, so that'll be 1 million customers times 30. So now I'm at 30 million, and the cheapest price is about 70 cents per login. So I'm going to need to spend about $25 million a month on my portal. It's like, that's not, like, no one's ever going to pay that. And no one's ever going to log into your portal 30 times in a month, right? Or every day, right? So it's a very difficult calculation to have any sort of confidence in saying, oh yeah, like your portal next month is going to cost you X number of dollars, or sorry, talking to the right audience, X number of pounds. So that's why it sucks. It's people have this perception that it's expensive, and I mean, it's not. I don't think it's cheap, but it's not as expensive as people usually do, their back of the napkin math, where they're like, oh, I'll probably need this. Oh my goodness. Like, I could just build a WordPress site for that monthly licensing fee. And it's like, yeah, it's not quite the same. So, but that's why it sucks.
I agree with you. You know what, honestly, Nick, one thing I saw when I was at my previous employer was the fact that people used to complain about portals licensing. Yes, when it gets to B2C, it does get quite expensive to an extent. But try and rebuild all that integration between a portal layer and a data structure. Try and recreate that security model, right? There's a lot of stuff that's gone in there that I think is really tough to do. And I think that you're paying a lot. You're actually, you're paying for the fact that Microsoft has spent a lot of time, or ADX, now Microsoft, spends a lot of time pre-building that. So actually your time to value is a lot faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. And I mean, that could be said of the whole Power Platform too, exactly. Right? Like, you run into, hardcore. I've, run into hardcore devs all the time, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, Power Platform's nice, but I can build all that." I'm sure you can. I'm sure you're very talented. Pat on the head. Good, good. But I'm going to be done faster than you. It might not look as pretty and might not do everything, but we'll be done. We'll have something functioning very quickly. The same could be applied to portals as well. Then yeah, we could build something completely from ground up, and I've been down that road, and it takes a while. I've worked on other platforms too. I'm working on a project now in WordPress. It's actually pretty slick. Like some of the tooling and stuff is good, but at the end of the day, I wish I actually could do this project in portals, and actually more for pricing reasons it can't. So anyways, there is that for sure. And hopefully again with the feedback, Microsoft, as much as we hate it when they change licensing, hopefully they can make it a little bit more fair, more predictable, in more ways it's more easier to consume. If they came to me and they say, fine, tough guy, how would you do it? Basically, I would flip the entire Power Platform over to Azure consumption pricing. And I've actually mentioned that before, and they said, no, like business people don't understand consumption pricing. And to me, I said, that's bullshit. Anybody that's paid an electricity bill or a water bill totally understands consumption pricing.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Pay for what you use.
Totally in agreement there. On the actual product side itself, what would you say is the one thing the product needs? What would be your one big ticket item if you could add something to portals?
Big ticket. There's a bunch of things. I would definitely make the designer experience. I'd probably invest, if I was given the budget, I'd probably invest a lot. It's still running on Bootstrap 3. I know they have a strategy to kind of move it to more modern designer and front ends and stuff like that. But that's part of where I probably put a lot of the focus is on that design side. And then the other thing I would be doing is fixing what's now known as advanced forms to put together or put some tooling around that. And I know I've been screaming on there's an XRM toolbox Slack of trying to get someone to build a tool to build advanced forms, or what's formerly known as web forms. I had to do one this week, and it was just like, okay, connecting the dots and going back and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think over in the grand picture, just getting that designers right to make it easy to make your portal not look like a portal. And there's a couple folks in the community that are really good at that. I think of Ulrike in Norway, if you know her, she does some great blog posts, and she's been on a few sessions as well. And also Franco in the UK here or there, and he's built that Spotify clone. I think their YouTube's on for Scottish Summit. Take a look at that. And but the thing is, with both of them, that took a lot of work to get the portals to look that way. I wish the tooling would make it a little bit easier for people like me. I'm a citizen designer, barely, but make it easier for me to put together portals that look like that. Nick, do you have what's your thoughts?
Well, mine's not nearly as excited as that. I would just like, if I had a little bit of money to spend and could direct the portals team, it would just be to get some of the like little wins that I think, man, I feel like I could implement that in a day. So things like support for multi-selects, the file attribute, just some of the things that are in the platform. And when you have to explain that, oh no, actually that doesn't exist on portals, if we could fill those gaps, something I couldn't do in a day, but it would be nice if they do things like business rules. So just kind of more consistency across the platform, where if you can do it in a model-driven app, you can do it in portals. So that's kind of, but really multi-selects, like, come on, as much as I hate multi-selects, like I hate them, but a lot of times we're brought into projects after the fact where multi-select is already there. So we don't really have much of a choice. And now we're writing plugins and a bunch of, creating extra fields and plugins. And it's like, how hard would it be to implement multi-selects?
I would do file over multi-selects. I get mad. I hate multi-selects. It's funny. Multi-selects was the biggest thing we were waiting for CRM for years. And then when they finally implemented it, we were all kind of like, ugh. It's clunky.
Everyone had their own way to build their own multi-select, right? Everyone had some little component they used to use to create multi-selects, and now no one wants to use them since they're actually in the product.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of good questions coming here about PCF controls is now private preview and not private, it's public preview in Portal. So you can begin to, I think I've seen a few examples, but I think we're really going to begin to see a lot of cool stuff there. I'm actually pretty excited with from more of a developer side, the Portal's CLI tooling that was sort of released in public preview this past week. And that's going to help with the ALM story. The ALM story in Portals was always fairly weak. Those of you who know me, I'm a big fan of the Portal Records Mover that's in the XRM toolbox, but even then that's very manual. With the Portal CLI, I think that's going to really help that story along and be able to do a lot more Portal work within VS Code versus kind of some of the other tools. But yeah, for me, I can't wait till the file image field is accessible in the Portal.
One of the questions in the chat that I thought was pretty interesting was from Philip Cole. He said, is there any functionality that was in ADX that you wish was in Power Apps Portals now?
Not so much in terms of an actual functionality. What I liked about, and Nick probably, you might have an opinion on this, but the nice thing about ADX Studio Portals, the on-premise version, was when you had full access to that source code. Well, not all of the source code, probably about 90% of it. So if you wanted, you could build your own ASPX page in Visual Studio that could do all the different controls and do all the different things you wanted it to do, and then be able to surface that through the portal through a page template. That, of course, in the earlier days, the ADX Studio projects made that very developer heavy. But that was probably the one thing that when Microsoft took it and became online, that was probably the biggest gap. Okay, how can we do what we used to be able to do before in ASPX? Now we kind of have to do workarounds with JavaScripts and web templates and Liquid and all this other stuff. I don't know, Nick, what do you think? What's one of the things that you miss?
Yeah, it's funny you kind of mentioned that, because I remember when I was think I was still doing some contract work for ADX Studio, because that model of the hosted without being able to have access to the source code, ADX Studio actually had that before they were acquired by Microsoft. And so when I found out, they're like, oh, here's this offering, we host it for you. You can't change any of the code, but we'll host it for you. And I was like, who is ever going to use that? That sounds stupid. And it turned out that it worked out okay for Microsoft. But yeah, the thing that I get asked about a lot is e-commerce. And not that the ADX Studio was the best e-commerce, but it at least had something. And so we end up rebuilding that type of functionality quite a bit. So if they had a kind of a basic e-commerce module, I think that would make a lot of clients happy.
But going back, the ADX e-commerce module that they provided, and if you take a look, the reason why a good chunk of my hair is gray and missing is because of that thing. It was clunky, and not to despair.
And that's a nice word, clunky. Like it was not good. I'm just saying that, and a polished e-commerce module, which I know that they're kind of looking at for is it the F&O side where they're coming out with, or dynamic?
They actually have a commerce portal, but not with Power Apps Portals. So like it's funny because if I get approached with that, if someone wants to do an actual, like if it's for a membership registration or an event registration or whatever, then yeah, that's, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a pretty straightforward way you would build out, and you can tie into a payment gateway and yes, pay for my registration or renew my membership or something like that. But when it gets into, we're going to start building a shopping cart, we want to buy these t-shirts and buy this color and do this and that. I tend to kind of point people towards something like a WooCommerce or a Shopify instead, because that's what those platforms are designed to do, and they have the REST endpoints that you can actually talk to them and get them back into Dataverse if you really need to. That's just my opinion on the pure e-commerce side. And I don't know if Microsoft would do anything, because like we said, they do have an e-commerce product sitting on the supply chain management side.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to ask about, actually. Like with the e-commerce product, like I know they've got different use cases, but Microsoft is maintaining two like theoretically low code website builder tools, right? Where do you kind of see the future of that? Any ideas, or what you're allowed to kind of say if you know?
I think the fact that they both have dynamics in them makes it seem like they're more related than I guess Portals doesn't have dynamics in it now, but it's like, yeah, I mean they're both owned by Microsoft, but a completely different audience. Like they've struggled enough trying to merge F&O and CE for the last 12 years that I've been involved. So I see those as being relatively separate for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Like we are seeing a better integration, but at the end of the day, and this goes on a whole other thread about Dynamics 365. Dynamics 365 really is 2 or 3 or 4 completely different, separate product lines. When we compare the old CRM and the AX, and of course the nav and all that, it's just Dynamics 365 is like in name only. Now that you are seeing some convergence there, because there is a customer portal of sorts that is using the dual write capabilities. But again, that's really more for that B2B type kind of, yes, they can view orders, but it's not an e-commerce platform in the same sense of, you're buying kind of products in the shopping cart kind of thing.
Another interesting question from Philip Cole is when or if you think PowerFX will touch portals.
PowerFX. I think again, this is kind of speculation. I don't think you'll see it soon, but I'd guess that would be the direction they're going. I think at the end of the day, PowerFX is like everything with Microsoft. It's not necessarily new. It's just been rebranded. But I think because it's the Canvas app language, but I think it would only make sense with a PowerFX to have kind of a single type of language across the board. Now, how would they do it and when that would happen, really have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me eventually we'll see some sort of level of PowerFX, whether it be on whether it might be kind of more of a server side thing. I don't see Liquid going away anytime soon. Liquid's actually pretty solid, but anyways, it will. I think it will evolve over time as well.
I think my hair is going to look more like Nick Doelman's hair by the time PowerFX makes its way into portals.
Do you think that's by design, though? Do you think it's to kind of keep it away from meddling hands like mine that don't know enough to get stuff working when you don't do it properly? Or
no, I just think honestly, the portals code has not changed that significantly. Like that, Microsoft has not been investing heavily in those fundamentals. Now, they have been investing heavily in the Portal Studio, and so the Portal Studio is potentially where you could start seeing that type of functionality show up. But it would be a huge shift in the underlying code, which they haven't been touching that often, ever. So as much as it is more kind of citizen developer friendly, it would be a pretty big change in the underlying code, which up to this point they've kind of stayed away from. So
yeah, and you're right. Like if you look at the investments, the Portal Studio, where that's only like a year old basically. I taught a class last week, and I actually teach mostly in the Portal Studio now, like to create web pages and to create do the lists and the forms, like kind of the basic forms and the lists and stuff, just because it works faster. But we still take a look back. The underlying structure hasn't changed back from the ADX days in terms of that portal metadata. So yeah, to add something like a PowerFX, like there'd have to be some big fundamental changes on the back end as well. And of course, that can't happen overnight either.
Yeah, like it's been more than 10 years since I actually worked at ADX Studio, and I would not be surprised if I could go in there and find my lines of code in the product. Like when they did the source code release, what was that? 3-4 years ago.
3-4 years ago, yeah.
Like you can still use that, and there's still a ton of code in there that's there. So they've just that's not really where their focus has been, is on the kind of the underlying infrastructure. It's been more on making it, improving the for example, the big news is, you can now manage table permissions in Portal Studio. Zero new functional changes for the portal. Like, it doesn't give you any new features. It just makes it easier to use the features that are already there. Yep. So that seems to be where the focus is.
Yeah, the front end stuff. It's good question about the portal. I'm looking in the chat, just kind of, if we skip questions, I apologize. It's not on purpose. But the portal web API about being slow to update a single file, especially when you refresh the portal's cache. Well, yeah, because it is if you actually look in the Microsoft Docs, it is cached the portal web API too. So I've noticed this the other day. The first time I was trying to create a record, it takes a second. Like, there's a noticeable delay, and it is asynchronous, so it's not going to be instantaneous either. But then when you start creating records immediately following, it actually seems to go a lot faster. Some with the updates as well. So it's really, why does it seem slow? It is about the caching and whether it's what we call a cold portal, if it's not been kind of cached through yet. I don't know, Nick, have you been doing much with the Portal Web API yet? Or are you still companion apping it?
We're starting to do a little bit more Web API now that it's GA. But I can't say I've noticed too much in terms of the performance of it. So, yeah.
I think we'll keep an eye on that, because it is relatively new, and I'm sure as more people begin to work with it, we'll be seeing some stuff. Todd, who's also here in Ottawa, and it's funny, we talk about Matt Beard being the newest MVP. Todd holds the record for the shortest ever MVP at negative days. He actually got his job at Microsoft before he was awarded, and kind of sort of a little nexus there where he got his award after being with part of Microsoft for a few days. So he actually he's been an MVP for negative days. But he's asking the question, what's the go-to learning resource for working with portals? So the free, I'm not self-promoting answer, well, even a little bit, the learning path on MS Learn, I think, is pretty good. And a bit of promotion there. It was George Dubinsky and I that do a lot of work on that, and a lot of that's been inspired by George. And so that's definitely something to look at. I'm part of a group of other MVPs, along with David Yak, George Dubinsky, Julie Yak, Derek Borman, myself. We run a site called 365.training. I have some portal courses on there. Julie has a portals course as well. And we also have some modules in some of the Absolute Beginner's Guide as well. So some of that's paid, and it is paid there. You can get a subscription, but I think it's good value. That's self-promotion. And there's in the chat window too, we're talking about Victor Dantes, who's also, he's here in Canada as well, in the West. Victor's doing a community Zero to Hero portals, and I've heard nothing but good things about those sessions as well. And I know Nick and I were going to have a discussion with Victor about that on an upcoming podcast. We just got to get that recorded at some point too. So there's definitely a lot of learning resources out there, but I think the big thing in terms of learning is sometimes you got to take your head out of the Dataverse or out of the CRM world and take a new approach to this, because it is radically different. I kind of got thrown in when I started learning portals. I knew Dynamics CRM inside and out, so I just assumed, this is just exposing this to the web. It should be easy. It wasn't. I kind of had to start completely from scratch and figure out all the stuff, get pieced together, and figuring out entity lists and entity forms and web pages and page templates. And I actually drew diagrams of how this all fit together, and finally got my head wrapped around it to be productive. And then that's basically when I started my course. When I built my course years later, it was all about, if I could go back in time and deliver a course, this is the course that I wanted to kind of teach myself. So that's the sort of thing with portals, is it's hard to start, but once you sort of get your head wrapped around some of the concepts, it's a bit easier. With the Portal Studio, it is a lot easier to build portals with the Portal Studio, but I think it's important to take a look at the metadata, what's happening behind the scenes, and you can see that in the portal management app. And that by understanding what's happening there makes it easier to get your head wrapped around portals. Yeah, Nick, you do training as well for your clients. What's sort of the approach you take?
Yeah, it's more kind of ad hoc. You'll, depending on the types of resources, whether they're more kind of citizen or pro dev. But we typically are pointing people over to this paid training site that you may have heard about 5 minutes ago, for kind of that basic training. The Microsoft Learn stuff, I don't really have, other than like lots of great community content. Historically, you got Megan V. Walker. We've got Eliza has a lot of content. I've got we're over 100 little YouTube videos on my channel. I've got some blog posts. You've got Oliver Rodriguez. You got Alexander. So lots of great kind of community content. The biggest challenge with that stuff is it's not structured. You can't just kind of sit down and say like, oh, I want to learn portals today. Well, it's tough to kind of start. Just pick a blog post and start learning, right? You have to kind of have that base foundation. So that's where I point people towards the Microsoft Learn if they want the get what you pay for option, or the D365 training if you want the other get what you pay for training.
Free training is often worth every penny, isn't it, as well, sometimes?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Another great question from Justin Wilkinson is, do you see there being any portal-focused exams coming in the future?
God, I hope not.
I think there should be, and because right now, I can't say too much either because there is some NDA, whatever, but having done some work on the exam and the training certification side directly with Microsoft, the Power Platform, you think of PL200, for example, I taught that a couple of weeks ago. That's a 5-day course, and that's sort of to cover, and there's no way my portal's talking that is like 30 minutes. There's so much other stuff. Yet they're basing an entire exam on all that stuff. It's getting to the point where we need to start splitting off. I'm not saying Microsoft is going to do this or what the plan is. I have no idea. To me, though, they need to start splitting up the Power Platform exams. So no long, like to me, if it was up to me, again, they don't ask me, or they ask me, but they don't always act on it. If it was up to me, something like for terms of certification, there'd be a model-driven app exam. There would be a Canvas app exam. There'd be a Flow exam. And then along with it, there should be a Portals exam. Like I think these exams very much on the Dynamics side, like Dynamics has sales, Dynamics has a service exam, Dynamics has a marketing exam. They need to start doing that in the Power Platform. They need to start splitting out these certifications. And yeah, from another perspective, people might say, well, that's a bit of a money grab from Microsoft. Well, maybe, but I know a lot of you nerds out there who love, and I'm just like all of you, all of a sudden you're LinkedIn, look at my little badge, look at like my little sticker. I got this exam this week. All you guys are going to start writing these exams if Microsoft puts them out. So why shouldn't they? But I think if it's a little bit more focused, it would just make sense. If I'm going to write an exam, I would rather write a Power Automate exam, because that would be a good test of my abilities or my knowledge on that, as opposed to, oh shoot, I need to know a little bit about Power Automate. I need to know a little bit about Power BI. I need to know a little bit about how Dataverse works in terms of writing something like the PL200. You're just going to scratch the surface on the knowledge, and I don't think it's going to be a very good, evaluation of your skills than it would be a little bit more focused exam.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the last exam I wrote in 2010. So I'm not a big. I'm completely certified on CRM4, if anyone cares, but really haven't written any exams since then. Primarily because, I mean, with your focus on portals, no one ever asked me like, oh, are you certified and blah blah blah. It's like, who cares? But because we don't, I'm not at a partner where that sort of thing matters, right? We don't have enough people. Even if all of us got certified, we're not going to be a gold partner anytime soon. And so I think if there was a portal exam, I would probably take it out of curiosity, morbid curiosity, probably. But I don't know. I'm not a big exam guy. I mean, I took lots of exams to go through school, and I mean, you learn a little bit, but I probably am a little bit jaded by back in the day with the exams, where it's like, which of these solutions is the fewest number of clicks to do this thing? It's like, who cares? Like, why does that matter? That's not useful, right? So, and I think that they've improved since then, but I just haven't got back into that money to write the exams is coming out of my pocket, and I've never really been asked, do you have this XYZ certification? So why would I go through the stress of an exam?
Yeah, and that exam could be almost its own discussion as well. Like, I haven't written in over a year either because the exam centers they're pretty much closed. They've been closed for the last year, more or less. And I got a whole bunch of like crap and stuff on my walls that if I had to do a proctored exam, I couldn't do it. But yeah, I think a lot of it is due to the competency, and I think everybody knows this. In my opinion on exams is, you can't write something like PL 600 and then start calling yourself a solution architect. Yes, it's a solution architect exam. You need to be a solution architect. How do you become one? You do the work. You actually do projects. You actually, get clients. You run successful projects, and that's how you build up your experience. That's how you're going to become a solution architect. All that exam's going to do is kind of, gauge how well you know certain things. What I like about the exams is, if I look at, let's say, whether it's the PL 600, 400, or the 200, I'm looking at the list of skills and I'm like, I need to learn about Power Virtual Agents. I haven't worked on any project. I haven't needed them for anything. I don't know anything about them, but I need to study them for the exam. That might be my first exposure ever to Power Virtual Agents. So, I mean, I teach it, so obviously I have exposed to it, but that's where I think the benefit of the exams are. They force you to expose yourself to a particular stack of the Microsoft technology that you've had zero experience with. But now that you've done that, even though if it's all smart part for the exam, the next time you're putting a solution together for a client, they say, hey, we need some sort of chat bot whether it's on our portal or our external website, then at least you say, yeah, maybe Power Virtual Agents, or you might say, you know what? Yes, Microsoft has Power Virtual Agents, but I know that it doesn't do X, Y, and Z. So maybe we need to look at chatbots instead, kind of thing. So that's, I think, some of the importance of the exam is to get used that exposure to some of these technologies, as opposed to, and then again, if you're a partner, that's the other reason. Like I've worked for big companies where, you need to get your certification. Why? Not so much for yourself, but so that partner can have their gold status, or that's really the reason why it's happening.
Cool. Well, that's an opportune moment for me to say we've pretty much run out of time, and much as I would love this to run on and on,
Wow.
I'm due on the same call as Chris Huntingford now, so so I have to dash also. But all that remains is for me to thank you very much, Nick and Nick. This was awesome. I certainly learned a lot, or got some different perspective on some things. So thanks so much for taking time out to join us and give us your opinions on this. I don't think we've got a slide ready for the upcoming events in the next month, but what I do know is happening is there is the Imagineers hack this weekend. I know that's happening because I'm a judge for that. And then the weekend after is there's a cloud marathon, cloud lunch and learn marathon, which if you sign up for and complete one of the cloud challenges, you also get an exam voucher. So, if you would like a free exam voucher, then that's a place for you to go. So thanks so much to you guys for joining us. Thank you everyone for being here, and thanks for your questions for the team. And we look forward to seeing you all next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nix.